The morning light filtered through the blinds as I shuffled into the kitchen, clutching a steaming mug of coffee. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Time felt like an enemy that morning, mocking me with every passing second. I had less than 30 minutes to get myself ready for another business trip. My name is Emily, and on paper, I have the perfect life. A loving husband, 2 beautiful kids, and a suburban home that looks like something out of a lifestyle magazine. But if you peel back the layers, you will find the truth I have been hiding. Beneath the smiles and carefully curated social media posts lies a secret that has gnawed at me for months. I am not proud of it. In fact, there are nights when I stare at the ceiling, wishing I could undo everything. But this trip, it felt different. A sense of dread clung to me, heavier than the suitcase I was about to pack. It all began innocently enough. About 6 months ago, during one of my frequent work trips, I met Logan. It was at a conference in Denver, a 3-day event filled with back-to-back meetings and stale coffee. He was charming in a way that made me feel like I was 25 again. Confident, magnetic, and with a streak of danger that sent a thrill down my spine. Our conversation started casually, talking about work, clients, and the usual conference small talk. But as the hours wore on, the discussions grew more personal. He asked about my dreams, my frustrations, and the parts of life I rarely spoke about. It felt intoxicating to be seen, to be heard, in a way that I had not been in years. My marriage to Matt, while solid, had grown stagnant. He was always busy with his career, working late into the nights as a software engineer. I buried myself in my own work, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. But Logan, he made me feel alive. It started with drinks after meetings, then extended to late-night texts that turned flirtatious before I could even register what was happening. By the time I realized I had crossed a line, I was too far gone to stop myself. On one trip, things escalated. We had just wrapped up a dinner with colleagues when Logan suggested grabbing a drink at the hotel bar. The air between us felt electric, charged with unspoken tension. One drink turned into 2, then 3. I remember his hand brushing mine as he reached for his glass, the way his gaze lingered on my face a little too long. When he leaned in and whispered, "You deserve more than this," I felt a pull I could not resist. That night, I made a choice that would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. When I returned home, I told Matt that the trip had been uneventful. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and asked about the kids' homework, completely unaware of the guilt that was eating me alive. I thought I could compartmentalize it, keep my 2 worlds separate. But secrets have a way of seeping through the cracks, no matter how tightly you try to seal them. Looking back, the cracks in my facade began to show sooner than I realized. About a month after that fateful night with Logan, I made the impulsive decision to leave my wedding and engagement rings behind during one of my trips. I told myself it was innocent, just an experiment to see what it felt like to be perceived as single again. But deep down I knew the truth. It was another way to indulge in the fantasy I had created for myself, far removed from the responsibilities of home. Matt noticed immediately when I returned. "Where are your rings?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. My mind raced for an excuse. "Oh, I lost them," I blurted out, feigning embarrassment. "I must have left them in the hotel room, or maybe the conference hall. I am so sorry, Matt." He sighed but didn't press further, his trust in me still intact. I promised to replace them as soon as possible, and he offered to help with the insurance claim. "There's no need," I replied quickly, brushing off his suggestion. I knew I could not risk anyone digging into the details. What I did not anticipate was how that small lie would snowball into something far larger. The following week, Matt came across something in my car that I had not accounted for. A nearly empty box of condoms. I had stashed it there absent-mindedly after a night with Logan, convinced I had covered all my tracks. When Matt confronted me, holding the box in his hand, my heart felt like it stopped. "What is this, Emily?" he asked, his voice trembling. He was not angry yet, just confused and hurt. I scrambled for a response. "They are not mine. Maybe a coworker left them during a carpool," I said, the words tumbling out in a panic. But Matt's expression told me he was not buying it. "We do not carpool, Emily," he said quietly. his tone laced with disbelief. In that moment, I saw something in his eyes that I had not seen before. A flicker of doubt. A doubt I knew I would never be able to fully erase. I knew I had made a mistake. Matt was not the type to let things go once doubt had crept into his mind. For the next few days, he was quieter than usual, watching me more closely. I tried to act normal, carrying on with our daily routines, but every glance from him felt like a spotlight shining on my guilt. Little did I know, Matt had already taken the first step to uncover the truth. One afternoon while I was at work, he hired a private investigator. I would only find this out later, but it did not take long for the investigator to piece together what I had so carefully tried to conceal. Within a week, Matt had everything he needed. Photos of Logan and me together at a hotel, receipts from dinners, even copies of the texts I had thought I deleted. The investigator was thorough, digging up details that left no room for misinterpretation. Matt waited until a quiet Thursday evening to confront me. The kids were in bed, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to shake the growing unease in my chest. When he entered the room, his expression was unreadable. He held a folder in his hand, and I knew before he even spoke that my lies had caught up with me. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but cold, "we need to talk." I tried to feign ignorance, putting on a confused smile. "Sure, what's going on?" He tossed the folder onto the coffee table, the contents spilling out. Photos of Logan and me, time-stamped receipts, and worst of all, a printout of messages that I had foolishly sent during one of my trips. My stomach dropped as I stared at the evidence laid bare before me. "What is this?" I asked weakly, even though I knew the answer. "You tell me," he replied, his voice breaking slightly. "How long, Emily? How long have you been lying to me?" I froze, my mind scrambling for anything that could explain this away. But the evidence was undeniable. Every word I could think of felt hollow. Every excuse a lie that would only deepen the hole I had already dug for myself. "Matt," my voice cracked. I had no idea how to finish the sentence. "How long?" he repeated, his voice louder this time. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way he was holding himself together by a thread. He deserved an answer, but I could not bring myself to say it out loud. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally I whispered, 6 months. The words felt like a death sentence. Matt's face crumpled for a moment before he regained his composure. He sat down across from me, shaking his head in disbelief. 6 months, Emily. 6 months, and you looked me in the eye every day, kissed me, told me you loved me. While you were doing this behind my back. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to explain the unexplainable. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was lonely, Matt. You were always working, and I. "Do not," he interrupted sharply, his voice cutting through my feeble attempt at justification. "Do not put this on me. You think I was not lonely too? You think I was not tired? But I never did this to us." I had never seen him this angry before. He stood up, pacing the room as he ran his hands through his hair. "Do you even care about what you have done? About what this will do to the kids? To our family?" "Of course I care," I cried, my voice rising in desperation. "I love you, Matt. I love our family. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" he echoed bitterly, laughing without humor. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This is betrayal, Emily." I spent the rest of that night trying to salvage what I could, pleading with Matt to forgive me. But his mind was already made up. "I will never trust you again," he said, his voice hollow. "And without trust, there is nothing left." The next morning, I woke up to find him already dressed for work, his expression unreadable. "We will talk about how to move forward when I get back," he said flatly before leaving the house. I sat there in the silence, my head pounding, trying to comprehend how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Over the next few weeks, Matt took deliberate steps to ensure our marriage would not recover. He filed for divorce and insisted on full custody of the kids. "You can have visitation," he said coldly during one of our conversations, "but they deserve stability, and I will not let your choices jeopardize that." The private investigator's report became the centerpiece of his case. I could not argue against it, every detail was true. And yet, as I watched my life unravel, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Regret, anger, and a deep sadness for the family I was about to lose. Matt had the divorce papers served to me at work, ensuring maximum humiliation. The whispers and side-eyes from my coworkers were unbearable. I could feel their judgment, their pity, as I gathered my things and left the office that day. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and awkward exchanges. Matt made good on his promise to fight for full custody of the kids. His lawyer was ruthless, painting a picture of me as an irresponsible, selfish woman who had prioritized her own desires over her family. I tried to defend myself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The private investigator's report, the receipts, the texts, it all worked against me. During one particularly brutal court hearing, Matt's lawyer brought up the box of condoms Matt had found in my car. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, looking me straight in the eye, "can you explain why a married woman with 2 children would need such an item?" I stammered, my face burning with shame. I don't know," I managed to say, but the damage was done. The judge's expression hardened, and I knew I had lost any chance of being seen as the victim in this situation. Matt was granted primary custody of the kids, with me allowed supervised visitation. It was a devastating blow, but part of me knew I deserved it. I had failed them as a mother, just as I had failed Matt as a wife. As if things were not bad enough, the real twist came when Matt decided to serve me with a restraining order. "It's for the kids," he explained coldly when I confronted him. "I don't want them exposed to any more chaos." Chaos. That was what my life had become. I was a pariah in our social circle, my name whispered in pity and disdain at school events and neighborhood gatherings. Even my own parents had distanced themselves, too ashamed to defend me. Months passed, and I found myself living alone in a small, dingy apartment on the outskirts of town. The bright, airy home Matt and I had shared felt like a distant memory. My days were a monotonous cycle of work and solitude, punctuated by occasional visits with the kids. Those visits were the only thing that kept me going, though even they were tinged with sadness. Jeremy and Melissa were polite but distant, as if they were unsure how to interact with me anymore. One day Jeremy, my 8-year-old, looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, do you not love Daddy anymore?" The question hit me like a freight train. "Of course I love Daddy," I said, my voice trembling. "Sometimes grown-ups just make mistakes, Jeremy. Big ones." He nodded solemnly, as if trying to understand something far too complicated for his young mind. "But you made Daddy cry," he said softly, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. Jeremy's words haunted me for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his innocence tainted by the weight of my actions. My visits with the kids became harder with each passing week. Melissa, my youngest, clung to Matt during drop-offs, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck like a lifeline. She barely looked at me when I said goodbye, and the sharpness of that rejection was a pain I had never known. One evening, during a rare phone call with Matt to discuss scheduling, I tried to apologize again. "Matt," I said, my voice faltering, "I never meant to hurt you or the kids. I lost myself." There was a long pause before he replied, "Emily, it's not about what you meant. It's about what you did. And now we all have to live with the consequences." I wanted to argue, to tell him how sorry I was, but I knew it would not change anything. Matt was right. The damage was done. Then came the moment that shattered what little was left of my dignity. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in the apartment, I stumbled upon a journal I had kept during the early years of my marriage. Flipping through the pages, I saw entries filled with hope, love, and plans for the future. March 12th. Matt surprised me with flowers today, just because. I'm so lucky to have him. July 8th. We stayed up late talking about names for the baby. I can't wait to meet our little one. Reading those words felt like looking at a stranger's life. Who was this Emily who cherished every moment with her husband and saw her family as the center of her world? How had I let her slip away? And then tucked between the pages, I found something else. A photo of Matt and me on our wedding day. My smile was radiant, his eyes filled with love. For a moment, I could almost feel the warmth of that day, the promise we made to each other to build a life together. But the weight of what I had done crushed the memory, leaving only regret in its place. Just as I was beginning to think things could not get worse, I received an unexpected knock on my door late one night. When I opened it, I was shocked to see Logan standing there. His confident, charming demeanor had vanished, replaced by a nervous, almost desperate energy. "Logan, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to see you," he said, glancing over his shoulder as if he was afraid someone might be watching. "Emily, things are falling apart for me. My wife found out about us." My stomach churned. I had pushed the memories of Logan to the back of my mind, convincing myself that chapter of my life was closed. Seeing him now brought it all rushing back. The thrill, the guilt, the lies. "I can't help you," I said, stepping back and gripping the door. "You should leave." "Please, Emily," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "I just need someone to talk to." For a split second I felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the devastation I had caused, the lives I had upended because of my choices. I could not let him drag me down any further. "You need to go," I said firmly, closing the door in his face. As I leaned against the door, listening to his footsteps fade away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Logan had been the catalyst for my downfall, but I would not let him be the reason I stayed there. After Logan's visit, I realized how far I had fallen. My life had become a series of mistakes piled on top of each other, suffocating me under their weight. Days turned into weeks, and I moved through them like a ghost, barely eating, barely sleeping. Work became a distraction, but even there, I was met with cold stares and whispers. My colleagues avoided me, the stigma of my public humiliation following me like a shadow. One day, I overheard two co-workers talking in the break room. "Did you hear about Emily? Her husband left her, and she lost custody of the kids." Well, what did she expect? Cheating like that? She deserves it. I bit my lip and turned away before they could notice me. Their words stung, but they were not wrong. I had lost everything because of my choices. And now I was living in the aftermath. It was a cold November evening, when I received a letter in the mail. I recognized Melissa's handwriting immediately, the clumsy, oversized letters of a 6-year-old. My heart raced as I tore open the envelope, desperate to see what my daughter had to say. "Dear Mommy," it began. "I miss you. Daddy says you did a bad thing, but I still love you. Jeremy says we should not talk about it, but I think about you every night. When can you come home?" Tears streamed down my face as I read the letter over and over again. Melissa's words were simple, but they carried the weight of her confusion, her longing, her love. I clutched the paper to my chest, wishing more than anything that I could turn back time and erase the pain I had caused. That letter was a wake-up call. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of determination. I could not change the past, but maybe, just maybe, I could still be a mother my kids could be proud of. I started therapy, a decision I should have made long ago. My therapist, Dr. Collins, was kind but direct. "You need to confront the choices you've made, Emily," she said during our first session. "Running from them is what got you here in the first place." The sessions were painful, forcing me to face the ugliest parts of myself. But they were also necessary. Slowly, I began to see a path forward, a way to rebuild. Not my marriage, which was beyond saving, but my relationship with my children, and most importantly with myself. In an unexpected twist, Matt's mother became my unlikely ally. She reached out to me one afternoon, inviting me to meet her for coffee. I was hesitant at first, certain she would only want to berate me for what I had done to her son. But when I arrived, her expression was softer than I expected. "Emily," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I am furious with you for hurting Matt and the kids. But they are my grandchildren, and they need their mother. No matter what you have done, you are still their mom." Her words were both a comfort and a challenge. She offered to mediate more time with the kids, something Matt had been resistant to. "I'll talk to him," she said. "But you need to show him that you're serious about changing." It was not easy. Matt was still guarded, unwilling to let me back into the kids' lives in any meaningful way. But over time, as I continued therapy and made an effort to be present, he began to soften just a little. I saw the kids more frequently, short visits that grew longer as trust slowly began to rebuild. Jeremy was more reserved, keeping his distance, but Melissa's hugs grew tighter with each visit. I love you, Mommy, she whispered one day as we said goodbye. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The process of rebuilding was slow, agonizingly so. Every small victory, a smile from Jeremy, a longer visit with Melissa, felt monumental, but the shadow of my mistakes was always there. Matt remained civil but distant, his tone cold, and his boundaries firm. I could not blame him for it. He had every right to keep his guard up. But it hurt all the same. One evening, during a supervised visit, Jeremy surprised me. We were sitting in the park, watching Melissa climb the jungle gym, when he turned to me and asked, "Mom, do you think people can change?" The question caught me off guard, but I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Ido, Jeremy. I think people can make mistakes, big ones, but they can learn from them and do better. He looked at me for a long moment before nodding, as if deciding whether or not to believe me. I hope so, he said softly, his words carrying a weight far beyond his years. The turning point came unexpectedly. Matt called me one evening, his voice tense. "Emily, we need to talk." My heart raced as I agreed to meet him. When we sat down at a cafe, his expression was unreadable. "I've been watching," he began, his tone measured. "I see the effort you're making. The therapy, the way you are with the kids. I didn't think you had it in you." I stayed silent, unsure where he was going with this. "I'll never trust you again. Not the way I used to," he continued, his voice softening. "But the kids deserve more time with you. They need their mom." Tears filled my eyes as his words sank in. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. "It's not for you," he said quickly, his gaze sharp. "It's for them. Don't make me regret this, Emily." Logan reappeared one final time, this time through an email. It was short, just a few lines apologizing for the chaos he had caused and wishing me well. I did not respond. I did not need to. That chapter of my life was over, and I was determined to leave it behind. My focus was on my children now, on being the mother they deserved. I threw myself into therapy, parenting classes, and rebuilding my life piece by piece. The shame of my actions was still there, but it no longer defined me. It took over a year, but the tide finally began to turn. Melissa started calling me mommy again, her hugs growing tighter, and her laughter more frequent. Jeremy still kept his distance, but there were moments when his guard would drop. A shared joke, a quiet moment reading together, and I clung to those moments like lifelines. One Saturday, during a family outing Matt had reluctantly allowed, Jeremy handed me a drawing. It was of our family, Matt, Melissa, Jeremy, and me. "I thought we could still be a family," he said quietly, and my tears fell freely. My life now is far from perfect, but it is better. I have a long way to go, but every day I take another step forward. I am learning to live with my mistakes, to own them, and to grow from them. My children are my anchor, their love pulling me through the darkest days. Matt and I will never be what we once were, but we have found a fragile peace for the sake of our children. And for that I am grateful. If I have learned anything, it is this. Mistakes do not have to define you. They can break you, yes, but they can also shape you into someone better, if you let them. I am not the woman I was before. And for the first time in years, I can finally say that I am proud of the woman I am becoming.